Susan Jennings Lantz is a teaching associate professor of business communications and coordinator of the WVU Campus Read. In these roles, Lantz works to advance interdisciplinary humanist inquiry and critical thinking skills at West Virginia University. Lantz teaches business communication for WVU John Chambers College, where she has led WVU study abroad student groups around the world. One of her classes, she even taught a virtual study abroad with students in Bahrain entitled Appalachia and the Arabian Gulf, Women and the Entrepreneurship Around the Globe. I wasn't sure I was going to get that out. She also serves as the first WVU's Provost Living Learning Fellow. In addition to her teaching appointment within Chambers, she organizes the Campus Read for WVU. In this role, Susan encouraged campus-wide discussions on thought leadership like Max Brooks, Tara Westover, Brian Stevenson, Katherine Johnson, Emily St. John Mandel, and Percival Everett. Before coming to WVU College of Business and Economics, Lantz worked in various areas of the university, including the College of Education, Human Resources, Career Services, and the President's Office. In this 21st century has seen a surge in challenges against books that represent complex themes and controversial topics, resulting in book banning. Tonight, Susan will lead a discussion on who is banning, why they feel that limiting access to certain books is important, and the overall implications for public education. With that, I'll hand it over to Susan.
Woo! Woo! All right. Okay, so first of all, because I just want to say, I think that 40 years ago, when I was 16, I came to this church and spent the night in this basement at a lockout. And I think that Linda Yoder will be the definitive guide on that, because I think I was here with a gaggle of friends, including her son. So it's nice to be back here, and it looks smaller than it did then, unfortunately. But I distinctly remember watching Back to the Future, like on that stage. So, okay, and staying up all night and living it up. First of all, I need you to know a couple of things about me. Number one, I am a teacher, which means I'm going to teach this, I'm going to run this a little bit like a class, because I'm not capable of not doing it that way. And that means I'm going to need engagement from you, okay? So I want everybody to get their cell phone out and be ready, because maybe you look things up, and I'm going to have you tell me things, okay? So be ready, so I'll call on you, and don't be texting your friends. Got it? Got it, Ron? Okay. Second. I'm going to move back here. Yeah, you're going to move back. Ron, you can't sit in the back row. It's already full. All right. Second thing I'm going to say is that I am a child of the 80s, hence my experience in this basement with Linda Yoder's son and friends. And when I was a little kid, as many of us may remember, there was a show on called Schoolhouse Rock. And I don't know. Okay, no big deal. As many of you may remember, the intro to Schoolhouse Rock went, it's great to learn because knowledge is power. You remember that? Schoolhouse Rock. See, I'm singing. I told you I would dance and sing. And so anyway, I just want you to think about that as we're going through what we're going to talk about today. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. When I was in the 5th grade, somebody brought a really cool book to school. And it was called Forever, and it was by a woman named Judy Blume. Does anybody remember reading Forever? Okay. Does anybody remember? Well, Forever was cool because it was dirty. Okay, I mean, it was. If you were 11 years old, it was like the dirtiest thing you've ever seen in your life. Unfortunately, I've seen worse since then, but at the time, And every woman in the room who has read the book will know why we all snicker when we hear the name Ralph. And we all read the book, and of course you weren't allowed to have it in the school because it was dirty. But also, you read it, and then you gave it to your friends, and they read it, and everybody read it. It was the most read book in the school. It did more for literacy than you can ever imagine, all right? And so it was a lot of fun. And the whole point of the book forever is Judy Blume, who has been banned for a million different books, everything she writes, she gets banned. She wrote it because she felt that there needed to be a book in which teenagers engage in sexual activity and that something bad didn't happen to them at the end. Because in most books at that time, in the 70s, it really, if there was somebody who participated in premarital sex and it was a book written for young people, then a horrible thing happened to them at the end. And so she wanted to show that you know, if you are sexually active or you have sex, you're not like going to burn up in a fiery crash or some horrible thing is not going to happen to you. And I mean, it honestly, in retrospect, wasn't as terrible as all that. It was a very interesting book. I learned a lot about anatomy from reading it. And I'll also say that I don't know that it necessarily should have been in the library at school. I don't know that it shouldn't have been in the library in school. But I don't think, as a person, I was really adversely affected by reading that book. Okay? And I do know that every young woman in that classroom read that book and didn't put it on their "these are the books I read this week" chart. Another book that I read around the same time, I still have post-traumatic stress from reading. I wish I had never read. I have horrible memories of reading this book, and I think that book should be as far away from a school or any young person as it possibly could be. So there you go. And there's a lot less about anatomy in it too, I might add. There's some, but not like it wasn't forever. Yeah, not good anatomy, not anything you want to read. But this also swept through my middle school, and everybody read it, and everybody was fascinated. I don't think very many people are fighting to have this book in a school, thank God. All right, so we're going to talk about book banning, and we're going to talk about kind of what this means, but I want to kind of go over the history of book banning. First of all, there are books that are banned in other countries. And by banned, I mean in some countries you can get arrested for having these books, okay? In some countries, you can, and actually in the United States, in the past, there were books that you could not send through the United States mail for fear of being arrested. So we're going to look at a few of these books and try to figure out why. So I want everybody on this side of the room to get out their phone and look up Schindler's List and figure out who banned it and why. And then I want people in this middle part to look up Sophie's Choice and on their phone and try to figure out who banned it, what country, and why. And then I want the people right here to look up All's Quiet on the Western Front and figure out what country banned it and what. Ron, you are not looking it up.
Well, because my phone doesn't work in here.
Excuses.
Anybody else's?
Excuses. All right, here you go, Ron.
I got it.
It's 4747 is my code. Okay. I want this group to look up Jane Eyre, who banned it and why. The middle group, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, okay, who banned it and why. And then finally, the Satanic Verses, who banned it and why. That one's an easy one. All right, so these are books that can literally could at one time get you arrested in another country. You could not have this book, okay? All right, does anybody know Schindler's List? Who was banning Schindler's List? Malaysia. Anybody else? Indonesia. Lebanon. Russia. Okay. Anybody know why?
Pro-Zionist themes.
There you go. This very good student here in the front row.
Yeah.
Okay. It's my husband, by the way.
Got good husband points for that one.
Yes, you did. How about Sophie's Choice? Who banned Sophie's Choice?
South Africa.
South Africa? The Soviet Union. What else?
Communist Poland.
Communist Poland. Why did they ban Sophie's Choice?
Sexually explicit.
Okay. Why else? Well, I mean, shouldn't we know about the Holocaust? What?
It was too graphic, right?
Graphic.
Anybody else know why it was banned? I think Lebanon may have banned that one too. And part of it was, and then this was with Schindler's List, which they, by the way, the first title of Schindler's List was Schindler's Ark. Lebanon felt very strongly that it was very pro-Jewish. And so they said, okay, it's illegal to have this book, interestingly enough. All right, what about All's Quiet on the Western Front?
Germany,
Why did Germany think it was a problem?
because it was against them.
Ah, yeah, they didn't like that. Also, A Farewell to Arms, same deal. It was also banned, like a lot of places in the United States, because there was a lot of people having sex that weren't married in it. I know this because I was in that area this summer, and so I decided to read the book, and I was fascinated by how much fun somebody was having in the middle of a war. Okay, how about Jane Eyre? China. Why? And I mean, they will arrest you for this stuff. What was the reason in China?
Racial slurs,
Against who?
thieves, I assume against Asians.
Does anybody remember that in Jane Eyre? I mean, I believe it. I just,
C word in it?
I don't know.
AI says socially corrupting to youth.
I think it was a lot of that. I'm not real sure how she socially corrupted the youth, but I do think it's, oh, wait.
She is seen as a feminist because she turns down the offer of marriage.
Ah.
She was previously married.
Oh, we can't have that. And then once the poor guy's blind, she marries him because he's dependent on her, which I always thought was kind of freaky. Okay, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
China, the United States.
Why?
In the United States, they thought it was promoting drug use.
Okay.
China, same thing, challenging social hierarchies.
Yeah. I think it's kind of funny to note that nobody seemed to think it was a problem that the guy who wrote it may very well have been a pedophile, but hey, you know, look at the world around us right now. Okay, and last but not least, the Satanic Verses. What's up with that one? Iran?
India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Somalia, Sudan, Malaysia, Indonesia, Qatar, South Africa, Iran, Sri Lanka, and Venezuela.
Yep, there you go, Venezuela. Well, maybe with the change there, they can all read the Satanic Verses now. Who knows? All right, so why was it banned for people who don't know? Huh? Blasphemy against Islamic religion. Now, many of you know this, but I'll just throw this out here. Iran got really upset with Salman Rushdie when he published this book, and the Ayatollah actually put out a fatwa against him, which said it would be like a really cool if you just go kill him. And so then there were people who thought, well, that sounds like a good idea. I'll go kill him. And the poor guy had to go into hiding, and it was bad. And he was, I think, stabbed a few years ago. Really? Where was it? Chautauqua. Anyway, but it goes a little further than that because of the fatwa. People who ran bookstores were like, you know, I don't think we have that in stock because I don't want people to come in here and stab me, which I think is a reasonable response to the situation. So, it is illegal in some countries to have certain books. Now, I was in Thailand a couple of years ago. A book that you're not allowed to have there is, do you remember the movie The King and I? Well, it's based on a book called Anna and the King of Siam. Until very recently, it was illegal to have that book in Thailand. And there are a couple of other books that are a bit critical of the Thai government, and those books are not allowed to be there. So there you go. Here's some classics. Here are some books that, you know, we all kind of know about from when we were kids. And they have been challenged in the United States over the years. And so we're going to do this again. I'm going to give the people in that first row, the Satanic Verses people, you're going to get Huckleberry Finn. The people who are in the middle row are going to get For Whom the Bell Tolls. And The Great Gatsby, next row. After that, we're going to hit To Kill a Mockingbird. So these folks are going to, and then the middle group is The Catcher in the Rye. And then finally, we've got 1984 over here. So look them up and figure out why they were banned in the United States. All right, so let's talk about one of my favorite books, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Why? And I see people who were in my James class this summer, and so I just love talking about these books. I've spent the whole year talking about Huckleberry Finn. Little did I know when I read it as a junior in high school that I was going to base my whole career on that book. Okay, so why was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn banned in the United States?
Low-grade morality.
Yeah. So, all right, there actually are a couple of reasons it's been banned in the United States. Just as soon as it was published in the United States, it was felt that The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn showed low-grade morality, and it showed ruffians and children who were not good and behaving the way that they should. Now, something interesting to note is that when Mark Twain wrote The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, his thought was that he wanted to write the way that people actually talked. So he wrote a lot of stuff in dialect, and he wanted it to be the way that people actually behaved, okay? Now, the thing that's interesting about this is he hated things like James Fenimore Cooper and the Leatherstocking Tales. It was all highfalutin. He wanted it to be real, okay? And so anyway, it was considered to be very base and very bad and definitely not something that we should have our children reading, okay? Now, that was then. Huckleberry Finn has since then been described as the greatest book of American literature, yet it continues to be banned. Who can tell me why?
Racism.
Oh, explain.
The use of the word.
The use of the N-word, okay.
The dialect seems a little crazy, like
It's
it's making fun of people.
Okay. Which, I mean, it's kind of interesting because it sounds like that now, but I do think it was an accurate depiction of the way that people talked then. But
Right.
if we talked like that now, it would sound like we were mocking someone, so, But, all right, so let's go back to the use of the N-word. Now, if I had a child who was African American or biracial, I really don't know that I would want my child to be in a classroom where they read a book where they use the N-word, I think it's 54 times. Okay? I mean, I can understand why that would be problematic. I also think that if I had a child who weren't African American, I'm not sure that I wanted them to be in a classroom where they heard that word 54 times. Okay? So they bowdlerized The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn to a certain extent, and they have replaced the N-word with the word slave. Okay? All right, so there you go. That's not so bad, right? Except one of the people who uses the N-word all the time is Pap Finn, who is probably one of the most disgusting human beings on the face of the earth and certainly a horrible character. And he does use the word, and part of the point of him using the word is that he's a horrible person, and horrible people do horrible things, and they use horrible words, right? So that's a sticky wicket, okay? So I just want you to think about that. I mean, I'm not suggesting that you should ban a book. I personally have taught in high school, and I think that it might be best just to avoid Huckleberry Finn for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is that I think your average 11th grader probably doesn't always have the critical reasoning skills to understand what is happening in the book. And it's also a really good way to make a bunch of people hate Mark Twain. In fact, when we chose the book James this year, which is a retelling of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, as our campus read, and several people just said to me, I hated that book, Huckleberry Finn, when I was in school. Okay? So I do think there are some students who were brilliant and can get it and understand it. But personally, I just think I wouldn't waste my time on that. I would go with something that I was sure everybody in the room could understand. But that's me. And I said that to a group of honor students, and they started yelling at me. So apparently they didn't agree with what I had to say, which was kind of cool, actually. All right, so what about For Whom the Bell Tolls? What's the problem with that book?
Communism.
What?
Communism.
Oh, we don't like that?
We didn't.
Oh, we didn't, but we do now, or we're not sure? Okay. How about The Great Gatsby? Yes?
Sex and debauchery.
Debauchery and sex, which is always a good time. And the whole point of The Great Gatsby is that sex and debauchery does not fulfill you, does not make you happy, puts you in a lonely place. But you have to kind of understand that, I guess. And I guess their point was that people were too busy going, yay, sex and debauchery, and not thinking about the end message. All right, how about The Beloved, To Kill a Mockingbird? Why on earth would that one be banned?
Racism. Sexual assault. Sexual assault.
Okay, so sexual assault. When you say racism, what do you mean?
Well, the fact that, he was basically railroaded into this trial primarily because he was black.
Well, isn't the whole point of the book the unfairness of railroading him into the trial?
It is, but again, going back to the critical thinking thing, if people actually think about that.
Yeah. Any other thoughts about why To Kill a Mockingbird might be challenged?
It says here, a white savior.
Mm-hmm. So we've got Atticus Finch, who does not succeed in getting this guy out of prison, yet he's the hero of the book. And he goes out and everybody says, Atticus Finch is the greatest in the world. I told you I was going to dance around. I said, I'm going to dance around. I did not lie. But there's this idea that Atticus Finch is just like the greatest guy in the world. And it's really a book about how messed up the South was. And maybe Atticus Finch would have been even better if he'd gotten him off, So, yeah, so To Kill a Mockingbird is often cited as something that people who are liberal don't think is a good idea because of this idea of the white savior complex. So, we've been thinking about all these conservative groups who might be against books, but I'm coming up, I hope, with helping you understand that there are reasons that I might not want my kid to read Huckleberry Finn at a young age. There are reasons that I might find To Kill a Mockingbird not the best book to be read, especially if you're trying to kind of show a diverse point of view, especially since we're living in a world in which some really great books have been written about really great black characters by people who are black. Okay, The Hate U Give. Anybody read The Hate U Give? Okay, if I were going to start trying to do something that was diverse in a classroom, I'd start with The Hate U Give before I got to To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, I will say this. To Kill a Mockingbird is a fun book to read. I read it. I enjoyed it. I'm fascinated by it. But personally, I have issues with it being in a classroom. Okay, what about The Catcher in the Rye? Why do we not have The Catcher in the Rye?
Prostitution, swearing.
All kinds of fun stuff. Yeah, prostitution, swearing, anything else?
They think it was linked to Mark David Chapman's reason for assassinating Lenin.
Yeah, and I think they also found it in John Hinckley's house too, or in his possession. In fact, if somebody took a pot shot at somebody somewhere along the line, J.D. Salinger may very well have been involved. Actually,
Maybe also because Holden is kind of like a little shit, and he's not like
shocker.
He's not like the kid that's going to be obeying his parents, and he's kind of a loose cannon and does what he wants.
Has been kicked out of school many times.
He's the hero.
Yeah. I think that has a lot to do with it. I also think that I think it's interesting because I read it like when I was in high school because it was banned by God, and I was going to read it because I was a little discontent. But what my son read it, and he said, and what he thought was interesting was that the only adult in that book who was nice to Holden. Does anybody remember what he did? It was like he goes to, I think, an old teacher's apartment or somebody's apartment who's a man. And I missed this when I read it in the 1980s. Holden wakes up and the guy's touching him. He doesn't say where he's touching him. He's saying he's touching him. Now, in the 1980s, I thought he was like tapping him on the forehead or something. But my son, a child of the 2020s, said he was the only adult that was nice to him in this book was molesting him. And I was shocked. I didn't know that. But I think it's interesting that the reason it's challenged is because he uses bad language or he's discontent, and not because, there is an adult who, the adults aren't doing anything for this kid, and the one who does has ill intent, right? All right, so what about the 1984?
It said sexual content, but I didn't remember that part of it.
That's because it wasn't Forever. Now, you'd remember if it had been Forever by Judy Blume.
But the anti-government messages that, maybe for some governments it's hit too close to home. That,
Shocker.
Thought police and, strict controls of people's behavior.
You see how our words were coming up here? I don't know, stop doing it, but I always think of the thought police when I see myself being transcribed on PowerPoint. But yeah, so this Orwellian idea maybe hit a little too close to home. Yeah. Oh, here we go. It caught us. The thought police are back with us. All right, so here are some books that have been more recently challenged in the United States. Does anybody want to take a guess as to why some of these books have been challenged? I feel like you got the idea. You got your phones out now. I don't have to.
Moss is probably pretty graphic. I think I remember that one being, but I don't. Is that why? But also like anti-Semitism.
So I will get to Mouse in a minute because I've done a deep dive on that one. But the basic information is that there is a nude mouse in it. And that is why it was challenged. I have a picture. But, I don't want to alarm anyone about the naked mouse. Okay, so any others? Yeah.
Harry Potter because it has witchcraft.
Witchcraft and curses. Yes.
Don't we really have a big problem with Harry Potter for other reasons now, though, too?
We might.
Maybe the author.
So, just so you know, I am of the opinion that we separate the art from the artist. And I'm mostly of that opinion because if not, I'd never be able to go to a museum or watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer or anything else. But yeah, so a lot of people do have a problem with some of the political statements of this author. And also, the same thing has happened with some other books, like Ender's Game. Like, everybody loved Ender's Game, and then the author turned out to be unpleasant, and so then a lot of people think we should get rid of Ender's Game. And Dilbert. Dilbert? Yeah, I love Dilbert. I teach business communication. I use Dilbert cartoons everywhere. And then it turned out he'd been canceled. So, damn it. Okay.
Bad.
Huh?
He's pretty bad.
But his cartoons are hilarious. So, what do you do? Any others?
I think The Bluest Eye has abuse and sexual assault.
Yeah, some pretty ugly sexual assault in it. Yeah. How about The Handmaid's Tale?
Being too real.
All right. Being too real, he says. Anything else?
I'll bet somebody said that it was too man-hating.
Probably. Yeah. It is very graphic, and it does have very graphic sexual assault in it. Again, I read that in college. I was fascinated by it then. I don't know that I want a kid who's 11 or 12 reading it. I don't think an 11 or 12-year-old would go through it. I mean, it is graphic, and it is kind of icky and horrible. So the question is, at what point should you be allowed to read The Handmaid's Tale? And I'm not here to answer that question. I'm just saying that I also understand why somebody might not want their 11-year-old reading that particular book. Has anybody read The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian? Anybody know why it was?
Sounds obvious.
He's not really an Indian.
I think the homosexuality is what really got it. The fact that he wasn't an Indian was the least of their worries. It was more about the sexual content. So, okay, so back to Mouse here. Here is a book about the Holocaust that had everybody in the book is a mouse if they're Jewish, okay? And if they are a Nazi, they're a cat, because cats get mice, right? And except then there's this whole thing where he goes off, and if you're from Norway, you're a reindeer, and if you're from France, you're a frog, and if you're from the United States, you're a dog, and it's a whole thing. And then the gypsy moth shows up, and it just gets really odd. But anyway, everybody is an animal, anthropomorphic. And it's about the Holocaust, and it's about Art Spiegelman's father. He interviewed his father and his mother had both survived being in concentration camps and came to the United States. And in the book, millions of people die. You've heard about the Holocaust. Millions of people died. It was horrible, okay? And that doesn't seem to be what was disturbing people about this book. What they were concerned about was the fact that you could see her nipple. So there you go. And I might add, she's a mouse. I mean, you can't really tell there, but trust me, she's a mouse. So, All right, so there are different levels of banning, and there are different ways for us to kind of consider what level a banning is or a challenge is. It can be at the national level where it's like illegal to have a copy of a book, okay? Then there's the state level where they say, well, everybody can have the book, but we're going to decide that the schools in this state won't have this book in their library, which is what happened in Utah recently. Then there is kind of the level of remove it from the public library, okay? Then there's the level of, we'll take it out of the school, okay? So then there's the level of, you can leave it in the school, but we're going to take it out of the curriculum, okay? It can be in the school library, but we're just not all going to read it as a group. And then there's the level of circulation restriction. Circulation restriction is what they had at my high school. And my high school, I know this will shock you, I was the president of the library club. I know. We all should have known then. And anyway, if the woman who was the librarian, I don't think she really just wanted to deal with it. I don't even think she cared about books. But what I do think is that she didn't want to fight with some parents about books. So anything that came in that was like a dirty book or a book that might be challenged went into a special drawer. And the idea was that if you brought a note from your parents, you could read the special books, right? Except she didn't tell anybody they were there. The only reason I knew they were there is because I was the president of the library club and I went through all the drawers back there because I had special privileges. Okay, and so I read all the dirty books just to make sure everything was okay. Now, circulation restriction is a pain in the butt because first of all, then you have people wandering in with a note from mom saying, I can read the dirty book or whatever. Also, it's a problem because it makes more administrative problems. And so I have a feeling that when something is restricted, unless you have a very fiery librarian in the situation, it goes into a back drawer somewhere. And unless you are a particularly precocious high school junior, you're probably just not going to know that book exists. Okay, recently in Utah, about a zillion books were banned, and I apologize because this is a hard slide to read. And they included everything from some books by Margaret Atwood to, I think Forever's on that list, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which horrified me because it was banned for sexuality. And in the book, has anybody read the book? Perks? Well, the sexuality is that he's abused. I mean, he discovers it and has to figure out what to do. So I would think you'd want students to have the ability to do that. I think it's kind of interesting that A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Wings and Ruin and A Court of Silver Flames and A Court of Mist and Fury and A Court of Frost and Starlight are all on this list. And the reason I think this is interesting is because these are kind of a new genre of book called romantasy. Okay, and it is hot. People, everywhere I go, the women I know are like, romantasy, I love it. And my friend Monica even once said to me, A Court of Thorns and Roses is the gateway drug to romantasy. So if y'all are looking for some spicy fantasy, start with A Court of Thorn and Roses. But I also think it's interesting, who sat down and read all of those books and determined that they should be banned? Like I have this vision of somebody at home going, ha ha ha, reading A Court of Thorns and Roses, and then I better read the next one. I better check out the next one and make sure it's not bad.
They show up in droves to the Board of Education meetings.
About the Court of Thorns and Roses?
Well, just like about any book, There was this one lady who came in. I was covering the Board of Education meeting in Charleston once, and this lady came in with The Perks of Being a Wallflower and read out loud the sexually explicit part to make everybody feel uncomfortable and was like, this book should be banned.
Yeah, but she had to read that part out loud.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a little, okay. Yeah, so anyway, Forever is on this list. And these books have all been banned in the state of Utah, even though they were only challenged in one area. Utah said, nope, not doing it, okay?
Hey, Susan?
Yeah.
Are they banned in public schools? Are they
Yes.
banned in public libraries?
I'm not 100% sure about this one. They're banned in public schools. They are not allowed to be on the shelves of the public schools, okay? But the other thing is, we'll get to this in a second. But in the state of Utah, I don't think they can be in the public schools at all. So no Court of Thorns and Roses for you. There are two groups that write a lot about this. PEN America, which is a very liberal organization that's very interested in free speech. And they list a lot of, this is how many books were banned last year in the United States. And this is to your point, Lynn. And these books were all banned and that you read it and you get really mad. The American Heritage Foundation, which is a more conservative kind of group, actually took on PEN America and said, now, wait a minute. You said that X number of books were banned last year in the United States. We went through and looked up all of these books. And you said it was banned in this library, but I looked on the card catalog and there were 9 copies and 3 were checked out yesterday. So it could mean challenged. So the American Heritage Foundation, and these are both very politicized groups, there's no doubt about it. The American Heritage Foundation does feel that PEN America exploits the numbers a bit and it inflates them. Because like I said, there are books that, it's like being arrested. Just because you're arrested didn't mean you did the crime, right? It doesn't mean you're found guilty, right? Just because a book is challenged doesn't mean it's been banned. So I went through a lot of statistics as I was getting ready to do this talk, and I perused all of this stuff, and I came to the conclusion Mark Twain was right. There are lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? So if I were going to write a definitive research guide or paper or book myself, I would be very careful about all of the statistics because of what you bring up there, Lynn. So who's doing the challenging? Okay. Most of the time, the challenges come from people in people who are members of the community, and most of the time, except there is a group called Moms for Liberty that really goes out and makes a point of going about and challenging books hither, thither, and yon. There are actually, according to PEN America, about 50 different conservative groups that go out and ban and work on banning books, and they go outside of their region and to other places to ban them and that sort of thing. Again, I was not doing as deep a dive as I would be if I were on record for all of this. But Moms for Liberty seems to be headlining the whole thing. I did read a really interesting book, and actually I only got 3/4 of the way through it, and it's called Book Banning in the 21st Century, and it's about the mindset of the people who work with the banning, the people that you were talking about. And they tend to be people who are very interested in their community. They are people who are very interested in the moral development of their children, okay? And they are people who tend to be somewhat in awe of the written word, okay? I just think that's interesting. I think that based on what I was reading in that book, I think there are some readers who want to read everything and then make their own decisions based on what they read. So I'm going to read this issue, or I'm going to read about this issue, and I'm going to read about this issue, and I'm going to compare it, and I'm going to come up with what I think. But there are other people who and this book indicated that there are other people who read something and feel like, I've read it, now it's part of me, this is what I believe. And part of their problem, or with some of the books that they do challenge, is that if the book is now part of you, you have molded the mind of the child, sort of thing. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm just saying that this is a fascinating book you might want to look into. All right, so here's the thing about book banning. It causes two things. It is, the first thing is called the Streisand effect, and the second one is called the Cobra effect. I would like for everyone on this side of the room to get out their phone. Ron, get your phone out. And I would like for everyone on this side of the room to get out your phone. I want this group to get out your phone and look up the Streisand effect. And I want this group to get out the phone and look up the Cobra effect.
What is the Streisand
I guess it's the opposite.
Now, I'm going to ask for somebody to explain what these are, and I want you to use figures and numbers.
Uh-oh.
Data. Hardcore data, Ron.
That would be the people behind me.
You want data on what?
The Cobra effect. All right, so what is the Streisand effect?
When you try to ban something, you actually make it more popular, that people start to seek out the information about it to see what it was about.
So why is it called that?
Because
Yes, in the back row. Sorry.
In 2003, Barbara Streisand tried to, is that the picture?
Yeah.
Tried to sue or something?
$50 million.
So she didn't want anybody to look at her house. Now, she had her reasons. It was like she was worried about security. And so this picture appeared on the internet, and she was like, take it down, I will sue. Okay, so what happened?
420,000 views.
Yes, 420,000 people were like, I got to see this house. Is that interesting? Because it was like forever. They told us not to read it, and by God, we all read it, right?
And that was still early internet, too.
Huh?
That was early internet.
Yeah, that was before. That was when you had the dial-up modem that went.
You had to go search for this.
Yeah. This is what we were doing back in the late 80s and early 90s. All right, how about over here? What is the Cobra effect?
You're trying to do something good, but it backfires.
Okay, so what is it based on? It's kind of, yeah.
It was based on the apocryphal story.
Apocryphal, she is correct.
Story that the British put a bounty on cobras, and they said, for as many dead cobras as you bring in, we will give you money, and it led to apocryphally breeding of cobras, so that way you get money. But again, it does not appear to be real, but that's the story.
And I've heard the same story about rats and bunny rabbits, and I'm sure somewhere it is true, but okay. But it is this idea that you say don't do it, and everybody runs out and does it. I don't know if anybody remembers the late 80s. They were a time of hair. And you may remember this lady over here on the far end. Her name was Tipper Gore. She was married to Al Gore, who was at one time our vice president. And as soon as he stopped being the vice president, she divorced him. And this is Mrs. Baker, and her husband was some Republican somebody. And the two of them decided that they were going to have a bipartisan group, and they were going to start the Parents Music Resource Group, okay? And they were going to look at rock and roll records, and they were going to put labels on them and say whether or not it should have parental advisory, okay? And then, here's my favorite part. Here's Dee Snider with his hair from Twisted Sister. And I wrote a research paper about this my junior year in high school. I kid you not. And anyway, Dee Snider said, no, this is stupid. We shouldn't have this parental advisory thing. But they did start putting these labels on music that was considered, it was called PMRC, Parents Music Resource something, and content. And they would put it on your, at the time, cassette, because it was the 80s. They put it on your cassette, and the cool kids had them to the point that people actually just started producing the stickers, and you could buy them, and you could put them on your notebook and that sort of thing, right?
Susan, I will say there were probably 1,000 bootleg copies of Two Live Crew going around Cheat Lake Junior High back then.
Yeah, well, there you go, because they were on cassette, and it was really easy. You know, this is before we had Napster. Yes.
I always like the Stephen King quote, and I just found it here, because so many of his books have been banned. And he says, read whatever they're trying to keep out of your eyes and your brain, because that's exactly what you need to know.
And nobody knows that better than a bunch of junior high kids, right? All right. This is the one that one of my colleagues at work mentioned was the fact that DARE, which is an organization, which is something that they put together through the police force, does this stuff in school where they teach you about drugs and the ills of using drugs and that sort of thing. And I have to say that when my kids went through the DARE program, they actually came home and knew way more about drugs than I ever did. And so I had to learn it on the streets, but they knew it all in school, and they could classify and everything. But anyway, it was a big deal once you got your DARE t-shirt to go out and do drugs while you're wearing your DARE t-shirt. I am not suggesting anybody should do this, but I am saying that this is the sort of thing that happens if you're not careful. And somebody else at work came up with this one. The pencils they passed out, and the first one at the top says, too cool to do drugs. Second one says, cool to do drugs. Then it says, do drugs. And then finally it just says drugs. So you need to be careful about your messaging, people. All right, so I could stand here and give you all the statistics about book banning, but to be perfectly honest with you, there's a lot of conflicting information, and there are a lot of reports that you can read online. You have shown me that you're all capable of picking up your phones and using Google, so I'm not going to go deeply into there. But I want to talk about when a book is banned, who wins, okay? And this is who wins: authors, lawyers, the retail people, and political parties. And let me explain why. There was Carnegie Mellon and George Mason University did a study, and they discovered that banned books in one state led to an 11% increase in circulation of the book in states of different political leanings that did not ban the book. So that means that in Utah, when they banned, I don't know, Wicked, which they did, somebody over in Vermont, it went up 11% in Vermont where they didn't have the book ban. That there is a 12% surge in circulation for a short time after a book is banned. Everybody says, what? They banned it. I got to go read it. I saw at least 3 of you write down that you wanted to read A Court of Thorns and Roses when I said it was romantasy. I saw it. I know you're going to do it. When a book is banned, it increases the reviews and the ratings over non-banned books. And if you look at the Amazon sales rank, the ranks will go up 41% following a book ban, okay? So, whatever you do, if you're an author, you want your book to be banned, right? Actually, that's not completely true. So first of all, that works out really well if you're a noted author. So, the guy who wrote Mouse, I know a lot about Mouse, his name is Art Spiegelman, and that book won the Pulitzer Prize in like 1986. I think. And when a few years ago, well, see, I knew this was going to happen. Okay, in 1980, this is why I don't tell students not to have their phone on in class, because I'm the worst offender. In 1986, Mouse won the Pulitzer Prize. And then, I think in 2022, it was banned at a school. Moms for Liberty showed up, saw the naked mouse, got all upset, and banned it. The book went crazy, okay? I mean, it went crazy. Hold on. Here we go. Now I got to go back. There was a 46% of an increase in the sales. At the time, I was on a board that, by the 4th week, the increase in sales for Mouse was, after the banning, was 753%. 14,000 copies were sold in the 4th week. And 36 years after the book was originally published, it shot to #1 on Amazon's bestseller list. Now, I just want to throw this out there for you. I was working with a group, and we wanted to do, it was during COVID, and you know how COVID was, and somebody said they banned Mouse, and we were all like, they banned Mouse, we must do something. So I was in charge of the campus read, so of course I thought we should do something. And so I set about working with a group of people, and we had a panel, and we did it, and it was out on the internet about, it was called Mouse, What's the Fuss About, right? And we explained why it was banned and what it was about. But the problem we had was nobody could get their hands on the book because there weren't enough copies of the book. This is one book that you can't easily distribute electronically because I did get a bootleg copy to try to read it. And let me tell you what, you won't do it because it's a graphic novel. It's just, the way they had it set up was very difficult to read. You can read graphic novels on, iPads and on Kindles and things like that. But this one had not been set up that way. So there were no physical books to read. I fortunately had one left over from early graduate school, and I was able to dig it out. But people could not get their hands on the book. So they had to go back and reprint those books like crazy because everybody wanted to read Mouse because they were stuck at home with COVID, and they heard there was this neat comic book that everybody should read about the Holocaust, and there was a naked mouse, what else could, and so it just took off. Well, now, when we choose a campus read, we have to be mindful of the fact that there have to be enough books for our students to have, right? We can't just decide we're going to choose a campus read and there are not enough out there, there has to be a supply. So I remember I called the publisher because we decided to make it the campus read the next year because the students really liked it. And I called the publisher and I said, can we do this? Are there enough books? And they said, yes, we reprinted. So, I mean, in the case of Art Spiegelman, being banned was great because it brought him back into the public eye. And of course, when you're an author, you don't just make money from the books. In fact, you probably make less money from the books. You make money from going out and speaking, doing speaking engagements, being somebody who is a thought leader, that sort of thing. Okay, now, so the authors can make money. Now, we're going to revisit that in a minute, Monica, okay? Attorneys make money. For example, this is a book called And Tango Makes Three. It is based on a true story of two penguins in a zoo who were gay. Or at least there were two male penguins who decided to raise a baby. I don't know if they were gay or not gay, and I really don't care. But it's a nice little story about the little baby penguin having two dads. And it was a picture book, and it won some sort of ASPCA award for being nice to animals. And somebody challenged it in Florida. They challenge books a lot in Florida. And the Florida legal firm that helped the school system support the ban earned over $100,000 as a result. So there you go. The attorneys were doing well. Retail can do well. Now, I don't want to make it sound like people who own bookstores are just like going to town with money, because that is not the case. Anybody who has owned a bookstore, my husband used to own a bookstore here in town, knows that it's a labor of love, right? But there is the banned books retail industry, okay? Does somebody have on a shirt in here that says, I read banned books? You do in the back, right? So there are things like people selling shirts that say, I read banned books. And there are people like me who I have a pair of socks my sister-in-law got me that say, I read banned books. And then there are all of the people who run bookstores who have special displays of books that were banned. Because, let's go back to that Stephen King quote. Can you say it again?
Read everything they don't want you to put your eyes on. Oh, wait, read whatever they're trying to keep out of your eyes and your brain, because that's exactly what you need to know.
Right. So when everybody hears that a book's banned, they're like, oh, I'm going to go read it. Also, digital content providers like Overdrive and Libby, people go online to read the books. I'm also going to throw out there, I don't have like data to support this, but I have a feeling that torrent sites do very well. Why would torrent sites do well in this situation?
Because they're going to pirate it.
Yeah, because as nearly as I can determine, everybody who is about 10 years younger than me and down knows how to pirate everything. And so it's not unusual for people. Huh? The Sail in the Seven Seas, right. So it's not unusual for people to reach out through some backdoor methods to pick up a PDF of a book. I know this because my students, when I used to require textbooks in my class, I would say, now you have to pay X amount of money for this textbook. You got to get the bookstore. And they'd say, oh, no, I don't. And I'd be like, it took me a while. I was like, why? Why don't you? Don't worry about it, Dr. Lantz. I got it. All right. We talked about, huh?
And his archive.
Yeah, yes, there you go. Okay, political parties do well. 90% of book ban related messages were from Republican candidates, and they resulted in a 30% increase in small dollar donations for candidates after announcing a ban. So if a candidate announces that there's been a ban somewhere, they end up with an increase in donations. This doesn't work for the Democrats. The Democrats have tried unsuccessfully, I know you're shocked, have tried to be we're the free speech people, and they say, we stop this banning, and the people don't give money because of that. So anyway, who loses? Well, the librarians, the schools, which means the taxpayers, and groups that are unfairly targeted. Women, LGBTQ, and actually the other group that is unfairly targeted a lot is people who are disabled. So just to give you an idea, when you ban a book, it takes up staff time, legal fees, material costs, and administrative overhead. Florida spends $600,000 per year digital cataloging books to make sure nobody gets mad about the books that are in the schools. Utah spent over $100,000 and 10,000 staff hours addressing 199 challenges a few years ago. And the Pennsylvania Nazareth Area School District spent $109,000. Think of how many field trips you could take with that, or kids you could feed. The groups that are disproportionately represented in banned books include people of color, LGBTQ plus people, and people with disabilities. Because the books that are banned tend to be about women or about people with disabilities, or there's some mention of sexuality that is not, in the eyes of the people who are opposed to it, normative. So, what are we going to do about it? Well, I'm not saying you have to do anything about it, but if you do want to do something about it, the first thing you can do is read banned books. Will you read your quote again? You're going to be sorry you ever participated.
Read whatever they're trying to keep out of your eyes and your brain, because it's exactly what you need to know.
All right, start reading the banned books. Join online community groups, support your public library, support librarians, and emphasize their professional roles, because in public libraries, the people who are librarians are doing a lot of work. The American Library Association does a lot of work to show that what's happening and keep the data and keep the statistics alive. Demand transparency. Write to your elected officials. I think this is neat. Support book sanctuaries, places where people can go to get their hands on books. Write op-eds, people who used to work for the newspaper, and monitor local politics. All right. Now, I just want to say one more thing. I don't have a slide about this, but I think it's important to note that what is happening, I'm not really as worried about the fact that kids can't get their hands on the books. And here's why. I think that if you're a kid, you can get your hand on social media. I think you can get your hands on, oh, did I do something?
I don't know.
Well, it's okay because I don't have any more slides, so, okay. Yeah, but I think you can get yourself on a BitTorrent. I think you can walk to the public library, which tends to not be as banned as like the school library. I personally don't think that students are reading that much. Last year, only 40% of the people in the United States read a book. And actually, that's pretty good. Now, that doesn't mean people aren't reading, though. What are they reading? Well, when I ask young people what they're reading, they say things like, I read a lot of fan fiction. Okay. I'm sorry?
Social media timelines.
Yeah, social media timelines. There is a lot of social media. There are Substacks. There are magazine articles. I mean, that sort of thing. I do think, though, that it's important to note that books that have been targeted for banning tend to be books that highlight racial issues. And I think that part of the reason that some of the more recent books that have been banned is because people don't like the version of history that they're hearing. All right. And I also think that there's a slow phasing out of literacy going on right now. Now, I mean, a lot of people don't read hardbound books, but there are a lot of people who are reading their Kindle, or they have a PDF that they pirated from somewhere on their phone or whatever. But I do think that this phasing out of literacy and the retelling of history delegitimizes education. And I do think when you add to that the prioritization of artificial intelligence, which is taking over kind of writing and critical thinking skills. So anything that you read that somebody else wrote was really written by this computer that basically pulled it out of a great pit of stuff. You're making it very difficult for people to develop critical thinking skills. Yes, Nancy.
And I don't know if this is still true, but doesn't Texas control most of the textbooks
Yeah.
in this country?
Yeah, because there are so many. They set it up so that Texas Once they kind of get the textbooks there, it's just perfect for the rest of the country. And so if Texas decides that something's not fit to use, or they decide that part of the narrative needs to change, then that pretty much, Texas and actually California. So, which is nice because California tends to be a little bit more liberal than Texas when it comes to this stuff. But they're the ones that pretty much own it. Yeah. And it doesn't just happen with books. I'll give you another example. Films that are very popular in the United States, like, what are the comic book films you guys watch? Marvel, yeah, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Those are very, very popular in other countries. One country that they're very popular in is China, okay? Well, China, I mean, you make a lot of money on that foreign market, okay? So China will cut things out of your film before they show it in China, okay? Or they'll decide not to show it in China. So it's to the benefit of people who live in, the people who are making these films to make sure that the Chinese government thinks it is an appropriate film. And so it influences the way that films are made in the United States and go throughout the world. And I mean, you know, it's follow the money. That's what's happening. And that's also what's happening with these books. So any other questions? Ooh, yes.
What's your opinion on audiobooks?
I love them. I'm always listening to one in the car.
Do they count as a real book, though?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you kidding? Actually, you know, I have a funny story about that. When my kids were little, we listened to the Harry Potter books in the car. And we listened to them at a very early age. Not because I'm some wonderful person when it comes to this stuff. It's because, well, really, I wanted them to shut up. And it would be in the car and they'd be talking and yelling and fighting. And I'd turn on Harry Potter and we'd all sit there and listen to Harry Potter. And so they went to school and when, like first grade, they'd listen to all the Harry Potter books, maybe twice. I don't know. I wanted everybody to be quiet. And the way that you got credit for reading a book was you took a little test online. And they balanced the amount, like your age group, okay, against the book. So if you read War and Peace in the 4th grade, you got more points than if you read Captain Underpants, okay? So it's a book, a banned book, I might add. And so anyway, my kids sat down and took the test for a book that was written for like people who are in the 6th grade, but they were in the 1st grade. But the reason they could take the test is because they listened to the books in the car. So my kids both got awards for reading more books than anybody else in the whole school. And I went to the teacher and I said, they didn't read those books. I mean, they're reading Captain Underpants, but we just listened to them in the car. She said, it's fine, don't worry about it. Okay, whatever, I don't care. Here's your award, kid. Well, anyway, at the end of the year, I was in one of the kids' classrooms and the teacher gave my son an award for reading all the books. And they said, how is it that you read all these books? And he said, well, we read all the Harry Potter books. And all the parents went, oh, because, you know, they're like 6 years old, right? And I was horrified. And then he said, well, we didn't really read them. We just listened to them on audio. And all the parents went. So there's like a whole group of people whose kids went to school with mine who hate me because they think I cheated on having my kids read the books. Yes?
Well, it would be any different if you had read the books to them.
Well, actually what we would do in the car, is we would listen to them and then we would come home and we would take over where the book stopped. And my kids are real mad because they found out years later that after I drop them off at school, I continue to listen to the book because it's a fun book, you know? So.
When I first started listening to the audiobook, I wanted to listen to something that I was familiar with because I wasn't sure if I could keep track or be distracted by it. And then after listening to the book, it was like a whole new story for me. I actually really enjoyed it. And then it became important to me, not just the book, but who was reading the book.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Have you read Tom Lake? I love that book, and the reason I loved it is I listened to it on Audible for my book club, and my book club members are here, and then I ended up not going to the book club meeting, but I listened to it on Audible, and Meryl Streep read it, and she was like the perfect person to read that book. If you haven't read Tom Lake, and probably if you're a woman, I don't know as many men would enjoy it as the women did, listen to the Meryl Streep version. It's awesome.
Here you go. Thanks.
continuing on with this audiobook thing, I'll just say, as someone with ADHD, listening and having the actual book in front of me at the same time was how I got through my Masters of Divinity program.
Excellent.
And so it's a great tool for accessibility, to be able to listen and have that helping me focus. And when I hear something that I want to remember, I underline it really fast before it moves on.
It's not just for accessibility. It's also, when I was in graduate school, I had 2 small children at home. And the first part of graduate school was earlier. It was before audiobooks became the thing you could have on your phone. But you go to the public library here in Morgantown and you could get books on tape, and you could get books that were written for blind people, that were read for blind people. And I was working on a master's degree at the time I was working on my doctorate in English, and I had a job, and I was busy, and I had little kids, and so I have to read Sister Carrie by Theodore Dreiser. It was like this thick. So I went down and I got a tape of Sister Carrie, and I had to drive somewhere far away, and I listened to Sister Carrie the whole way there. And I remember the professor saying, "I don't know if that counts as a real book," and I'm like, "Yeah, screw it. It's going to count as a real book." But then, I'm a big Faulkner fan, so I checked out The Sound and the Fury. And The Sound and the Fury, the first part of it is written by somebody who is disabled, and they don't differentiate between time. And the person who read it didn't understand that. And it was the most out-of-body, weird experience I've ever had in my life. So, some people really don't like audiobooks because they don't like for people to read to them. I have a very good friend who is a very prolific reader, and she cannot stand audiobooks because there's just something about it that drives her crazy. But if you love them, you love them. Yes. Cute guy in the front row.
Yeah. There are a lot of enhancements to the audiobook that come from the narrator, because the narrator in the audiobooks is very important. For example, there's a series of books that I read called The Dresden Files, which are narrated by James Marsters in the audiobooks. And the book being from a first-person perspective, you can actually associate the character and the actor or narrator. I think that enhances the book from that perspective.
Absolutely. I think so, too. Yes, in the back. Good point.
Confession, I was a very weird kid. So
I was the president of the library club.
First week of school, the English teacher hands you the big, thick literature book. I took it home, and that first week I read the whole thing.
Somebody had to.
So the whole way through the whole rest of the year, she's like, "Now we're going to read this story." Done. So I had the whole book read. And I was always the one that raised my hand and said, "Can we do a book report?" And everybody else hated me. So saying that, I would like to think that if you're a high school junior or senior or even in college and you're assigned to read a book that may be a banned book or a controversial book, the whole idea is that you're reading it for discussion, to open your mind and learn more. I would hope, in a perfect world, that there are children who are going home and discussing those books with their parents, and that their parents are reading it too, and that they're learning something from it. But maybe that's just in my little mystical world.
I think that in my house, in your house, that might have been the case. I will tell you, I teach a class where we with college students, where we look at books to pick the campus read for the next year. And one of the books we read that we were looking at was a book called Cultish, which, by the way, is a great book. But anyway, one of my students said, we were talking about whether or not that would be a good book to use as the campus read, and he said, "People will get angry." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I took it home and my mother saw it." Now, this is somebody who's in college. And he said, "And she thought you were teaching me to be in a cult." Mm-hmm. And so he just hid the book. Now, that's somebody who's over the age of 18. That's apparently what happened. When I was a child, I had a good friend whose parents were very, very, very conservative Christians. And I loaned my friend a book that I really liked by Daniel Pinkwater called Yob Gurgle. And she didn't give it back, and I wanted the book back. And it was a weird book because it had only been printed, it was a very limited run printing. And as you may recall, in the 70s, in this area, you could go to, there was a Kohl's bookstore in the mall, and you could there was a rack of young adult fiction at the WVU bookstore, but that was about it. And so I couldn't get another copy of it, and I kept saying to her, "I need my book back, I need my book back." And she kept making excuses, and finally she fessed up that her parents had burned it.
Oh my.
And they didn't realize it didn't belong to her. And so they were out trying to find another copy of the book, which you couldn't find in Kingwood, West Virginia or Tunnelton. And it took me years to get my hands on that book again. I did find a copy. But, I mean, in their house, they're really, that was an issue. I mean, there was a book that looked sketch. They were going to get rid of it, you know? So as much as I would like for the world to be the way that you suggested it is, it definitely isn't for some people. Yes?
Is there a bill just being introduced in the legislature to, isn't there a bill that's been introduced into the legislature to have the Bible in the classroom?
Yeah.
And
boy, there's a lot of sex in there.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, you read, I mean,
A lot of sex, there's wars, there's violence, you know. I think we all should react to that.
I don't have a problem with the Bible being in the classroom as long as it's not the only thing that has sex and it's the only thing that's taught, you know. It might be nice to have the Epic of Gilgamesh in there while we're at it, and some Greek myths. And don't get me wrong, I'm Christian, but I do think that I don't want somebody else teaching my kid religion in the classroom. Of course, my kids are out of high school, so I guess I don't have to worry about that. So, yes.
I was wondering if you had any thoughts about the capacity for book bans to like fundamentally shape and corrupt how disciplines are taught in their entirety. I'm thinking specifically about Texas A&M banning Plato from the philosophy curriculum, or like CRT being banned, and how that impacts African American studies or something like that.
Yeah. I absolutely think that bans do make a difference when we look at the way that the narratives are taught. Interestingly, WVU, the state legislature has started a program called, I think it's the American Center, the Washington Center, okay. And it's interestingly based on kind of this idea that we're going to study the philosophy of Western civilization, starting with Plato and Aristotle. And I think it's really interesting that one place might ban it and another place might lift it up, you know? And I'm interested to see how this all plays out. I know that doesn't really answer your question, but I do think it does. You know, people get very worked up about the way that we teach, was it racial?
Critical race theory?
Yeah, critical race theory.
Which is for lawyers, but anyway.
And I always think it's interesting that people get worked up about that because, like, horrible things happen to this country, and they happen in every country, and I didn't cause them, and you didn't cause them, but at the end of the day, we're all going to have to deal with the results, right? So I think it's important for us to know what has gone on, but I'm not going to take responsibility for it. You're not going to take responsibility for it. I mean, we didn't have anything to do with it, but we still have to deal with the repercussions. So I just think it's interesting that seems to be a hill that people are willing to die on. Yes?
Speaking about the Washington Center, obviously it's brand new still. Do you see there being much of like a push of influence from that center onto the campus read in the future?
Actually, I met with the person who's in charge of it the other day, and I asked him to be on our committee. And the reason I did that is because I live in the state of West Virginia, and I think it's important that we listen to all voices. And I do think that sometimes we can get up our own butts, so to speak, to the point that we're not willing to listen to diverse views. The whole point of the campus read is to be diverse. We have been diverse. We have had writers who are white women. We have had writers who are black men. We have had writers who are Asian American. We have had writers who are from Rwanda. I mean, we've been all over the place. I see no reason that we shouldn't be looking at the Western civilization end of it too. Having said that, I do really hope that we can continue to have books that are contemporary. But I do think it's diverse. And I also want to throw out here, the West Virginia legislature is the one that came up with that. I looked it up. My uncle was one of the delegates who voted on it. I called him up and said, you voted on this. But that state of West Virginia thinks that's important, and we are a land-grant institution, right? So if the state of West Virginia thinks it's important, I guess we need to pay attention to it.
What's the next campus rate?
I'm not allowed to tell you. So I haven't had it approved yet. But
We'll turn off our cameras and you can tell us.
it's probably not going to be fiction. It's probably going to be nonfiction. And it's when you hear it, you're going to go, what? But then I challenge you to read it and tell me what you think. And I'll have an OLLI class about it this summer. Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
When you invited Noah to be on your committee, what committee was that?
The Campus Read Committee.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else who wants to be on the committee can be on it too. I'll take everybody. Yes.
This is not a question. This is something just listening to what you've said, which was very chilling in the sense that we have billionaires who are controlling information. Not only that, but we have Christian nationalists. We have very conservative Christians. We see that in West Virginia in this regard, that the governor wants to put "In God We Trust" on all of our schools. But that's not enough. There is a big push to go with Christian schools, okay, and private schools. And to me, the idea is that we want to teach our worldview. So, given what you said, I think this is all something that needs to be paid attention to. And it appears that, at least for me, that I was distracted and not really paying attention.
And I also want to point out that I think we've been teaching another worldview for years. And I don't know that it is any more accurate than the worldview that this other group wants to teach. I think that a lot of, sorry, I'm playing with the microphone, I shouldn't do that. I think that that's an important thing to be aware of too, that there are a lot of people who don't see themselves represented in the worldview that has been in the forefront. Now, I felt myself represented, but as somebody who is a woman who has been to graduate school and who has been an upper middle class person my entire life, I don't think that a lot of the people I grew up with were well represented, and they, we have very differing political beliefs, and I think that's part of the reason. So I think it's really important to pay attention to people who feel that they weren't represented and figure out why they feel that way. And take it into account, right? We're in a very economically depressed state. We all know that. We are in a state that was, the state has been exploited. We all know that. And the people here have been exploited. Okay? Every single person I know who goes back a generation or two knows somebody who has black lung or was damaged in a coal mine, right? And I think that is something we haven't been attuned to. Okay, now everybody got really chilly with me, and you're all just staring at me. So I'm gonna leave you with.
I just thought that was really badass. That's why I just thought that was really badass.
No,
yeah.
I like to think of myself as a scholar from the holler, but I like occasionally badass. Yeah. I'm going to tell you one more story about reading books that you're not supposed to read. One of my sons, when he was a little kid, his father would be reading comic books and watching Batman movies and things that were violent. And so sometimes we had to say to the kids, you can't watch this because it's inappropriate, or you can't read this thing because it's inappropriate, because a lot of times it was violent. And then we were also big fans of the Captain Underpants books. And, Captain Underpants. Everybody loved Captain Underpants. And I was a big fan of Junie B. Jones, okay, who also gets a lot of grief. And anyway, the kids' daycare was going to have a book tree. And they were going to have all the kids at the daycare write down the kind of book they like to read. They were going to take it to Barnes & Noble, and the people were going to buy these books for these kids, okay? That's nice. And so they came to my son and they said, what kind of books do you like to read? And he said, violent and inappropriate books. So I got called in to discuss his attitude. And I had to be like, well, what he was talking about was Captain Underpants. And he was talking about like Batman. And they said, oh. So they wrote down, I like to read books about animals. And he got a book about a puppy or something. It was very disappointing. So I'll leave you with that. I thank you all very much for your attention.
Thank you.